Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals. Then we'll spend part of the show opening and holding a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of soundscape of gentleness, of reflection, and maybe of grieving. There is a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Kapitia skink. The Kapitia skink is a critically endangered reptile native to the west coast of the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand, roughly 100 miles west of the city of Christchurch. Kapitia skink are quite small, measuring roughly 2 to 4 inches in length. They are lightweight, generally weighing less than half an ounce. Their bodies are long and slender, roughly the size of like an adult human pointer finger. They have a slightly rounded snout with large dark eyes set on each side of their flat, pyramid-shaped head. The torso is slender, cylindrical. They have 4 limbs, each tipped with 5 clawed digits. Their remarkable tail is often longer than their torso. It's flexible, muscular, stores fat, and it tapers at its tip. The tail plays a crucial role in balance, locomotion, and defense from predation. The Kapitia skink's tail is also prehensile, meaning that it can curl around objects, gripping branches, for example, to aid in climbing. It can also shed its tail as a defense mechanism. And so here's how this works. The skink's tail has what are called fracture planes. These are areas of cellular weakness designed to break easily. And so if a predator grabs the skink's tail, muscles contract around the fracture plane, causing the tail to detach. A bit like pulling a plug from a socket. The detached tail will continue to writhe and wiggle, ideally temporarily distracting the predator, which then allows the skink to flee to safety. And then over time, the skink will regrow a new tail. Though some observations on skink in captivity suggest that the regenerated tail may not end up being like as long or as strong as the original. Skink have scaled skin that is smooth, patterned, and a little reflective. Their dorsal scales, so this is on their back, are a rich red-brown with lighter and darker brownish flecks. Their sides are marked by light and dark brown and black lateral stripes. And their ventral scales, so this is their underside, like their belly, the scales are yellow, speckled with black flecks. And then the underside of their tail transitions from that yellowish color to a blue-gray that's pocked with pinkish marks. These specks and scale patterns are camouflage in their habitat, and the patterning is unique to each skink. And has been used by researchers to identify distinct individuals. Skink are cold-blooded. They rely on external factors to regulate their body temperature. Specifically, they're heliothermic, meaning they rely on warmth from the sun. And as such, they are diurnal, so they are active during the day in the sunlit hours, seeking food and basking in the sunshine to gather heat energy. Kapitia skink are shy. A 2024 study observed that the skink spend roughly 90% of their time out of sight, hidden. And then of that remaining 10%, this is generally like between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., they were observed in the open, spending roughly half of that time basking in the sun, and the other half like active, walking, foraging for food. Kapitia skink are insectivorous, meaning they feed on a diet of insects. Flies, moths, beetles, crickets, and their larvae. Kapitia skink are active predators, so they actively seek their prey. Likely relying on their eyesight, they are believed to have keen color vision and the use of tongue flicking to detect chemical cues in the air. Kapitia skink have a vomeronasal system. We covered the vomeronasal system on a recent episode, so just a brief recap here. Basically, this is a secondary sense system located in the roof of the mouth that can detect airborne pheromones and chemical cues. So the skink flicks its tongue to pull air molecules into its mouth, into its vomeronasal tubes, whose sense receptors help it locate prey. Scientists believe that the Kapitia skink may have also previously included fruit in their diet. Researchers at Auckland Zoo have observed a preference for berries among captive skink. We have limited information about Kapitia skink communication and social behavior, in part because they spend so much time hidden. They've been observed employing a wide variety of hiding places. These are called retreats, like high grasses, leaf litter, logs, and even human debris like wooden planks, fence posts, and metal sheets. They seem to be generally solitary, only coming together to mate. Males have been observed demonstrating some territorial behavior, so using visual displays like head bobs and raised posture to communicate their implied defense of their home range. And given their vermeer nasal system, they likely also communicate using pheromonal signals. Because their scales are sensitive to touch, it's likely that tactile communication and physical contact play a role in mating behaviors. Skink do not form long-term pair bonds. After mating, the male and female part, and then the pregnant female gestates for roughly 3 to 4 months, with birthing generally occurring in January to March. And so that's like late summer there in the southern hemisphere. Unlike most reptile who lay eggs, Kapitia skink are viviparous, meaning that they give birth to live young. The embryos develop inside the female, and then she gives birth to roughly 2 to 5 offspring who are born well developed and fully independent, able to fend for themselves immediately. And though born independent, Kapitia skink are relatively slow growing, and juveniles are estimated not to reach sexual maturity until around 4 years of age. And in total, they live just roughly 10 years. In the dream, the cold night is a threshold, more than just sleep. It's a stillness, profound and encompassing and threatening. In the dream, muscles loose and useless. Night thoughts muted, a slowed heart, the scent of menace on my tongue. Hidden, the moon takes its wander. And then the dawn. The dawn, glorious. It too is a portal from the first sliver of orange light, an awakening, reanimating, a kind of resurrection. A tiny firework spins its sparkles on the sidewalk and then goes out. And then is lit again, and then goes out and lit again, void and phoenix, every solar cycle. To truly start each day anew. In the dream. The Kapitia skink is native to a tiny habitat on the west coast of the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Their habitat is a thin strip of tall, dense grasses. This is roughly like a half-mile long and only 50 feet wide, nestled between the coastal sand dune beach of the Tasman Sea to the west and private agricultural pasture land to the east. This tiny remaining landscape is generally flat, with occasional small hills and scattered clumps of denser vegetation, driftwood, logs, and human debris. The Aotearoa, New Zealand coast has a temperate oceanic climate with high rainfall and moderate temperatures. So summer highs in the mid-70s, winter lows in the low 40s, and abundant rainfall, typically exceeding 100 inches per year. Before human encroachment and agricultural development, this region was once a coastal forest. And this is reflected in the Kapitia skink's anatomy. Its prehensile tail, which is not unlike a monkey's, is adapted for climbing, clinging and hanging from branches. But today, no native vegetation remains in its habitat. And recent research found no evidence of the skink climbing in the wild. The population trends and conservation of the Kapitia skink have taken a wildly winding path over the last 40 years. Though we do not have population data from this time, in the 1990s and early 2000s, a majority of their habitat was entirely lost to farm development. Then a 2009 field survey found no Kapitia skink in the wild. 2013 survey then found 2. And a more extensive trapping and surveying effort across 4 studies in 2015 resulted in the capture and identification of roughly 40 skinks. And at that time, scientists estimated the total population to be between approximately 40 and 50 skinks. Then in 2018, Cyclone Fihi struck the region, causing massive tidal surges that submerged the Kapitia skink's entire habitat over 2 tidal cycles in saltwater. Lynn Adams of the Aotearoa, New Zealand Department of Conservation explains, quote, "There were these massive waves. The whole entire population was overwashed over a couple of tides. And I actually thought that we'd lost the whole species. That was my worst day. There were a few tears, but it turned out that most of them survived." End quote. And so immediately, this is March 2018, the Department of Conservation initiates an emergency captive breeding program. So they capture 50 Kapitia skink in the wild and then send them to the Auckland Zoo for safekeeping and breeding. And that captive breeding program has been a huge success, nearly doubling the skink population. In the meantime, though, the remaining wild skink faced increasing threat from further habitat encroachment by human development and by predation by non-native human-introduced mammal species like rats, feral cats, and particularly mice. So in 2020, the Department of Conservation purchased roughly 3 acres of skink habitat and established the Kapitia Scientific Reserve. In the last 4 years, they have built a fence to keep out the rodent predators, and Jade Angel Christensen's 2023 study suggests that the fence is working. And so from 2021 through 2023, the Department of Conservation has been releasing captive skink back into the wild. 3 successful releases have placed 96 Kapitia skink back into their now protected habitat. Nevertheless, the Kapitia skink has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 2021, and their population is generally considered to be in decline. Our most recent counts estimate that there are less than 200 Kapitia skink in the wild. Information for today's show about the Kapitia skink was compiled from Perspectives in Biodiversity, Volume 2, Science, Volume 375, from the IUCN, from Jade Angel Christensen's Master of Science thesis from the University of Otago, 2023, the New Zealand Threat Classification System 2021 report, from Molecular Phylogenetics and Evolution, Volume 52, Issue 2, from the New Zealand Department of Conservation media release. This is a report from April 2023. From the Sounds of Science podcast, Episode 3 with Lynn Adams. From Zoo Taxa, number 4623. And from Wikipedia. And so in a moment, I would like to perform some music. In hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our fragile earth. But first, I do want to stress that this music is not for the Kapitia skink. I don't want to extract meaning from this being or put meaning upon it. Instead, I want the music to be an expression of my awe, held time to consider my relationship to other life. And so I will create and sit in this space of sound and awe and contemplation, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the Kapitia skink. I commit to holding its human name in my record. I am so grateful to have shared time on our planet with this being. And I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species, and in particular, the species habitat. And so, in the name of the Kapitia skink, I pledge to reduce my consumption and my carbon footprint, and I will curb my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of any plant or animal or their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin.